Keep clapping, a little bit louder. Uh, Thank you very much. You can sit down. I just wanted to know how it feels to be a guest of honor. And I really appreciate you giving me a moment to feel really good about myself. Yeah, thank you so much. That felt really nice. I feel like I need a moment to just like call my family that I had a guest of honor moment. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for speakers from Ethiopia for sharing those insights. I know that we've started the Startup Act as well in Uganda. It would be nice to benchmark ways we could pick a leaf from Ethiopia as well. Without further ado, that felt really nice. We are going to endorse this relationship and marriage. And I'm going to call up Joshua, Mr. Joshua Mutambi from the Ministry of Trade. Oh, goodness, I said I'm really bad with doctor. Please, I apologize. Mr. Doctor, Doctor, yeah, who are you? And please endorse this relationship for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the moderator, and thanks for that kind introduction. My name is Joshua Mutambi. I'm the Commissioner, Processing and Marketing, Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. I'm here representing the Honorable Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and address you. The remarks of the Minister as follows. The Chief Representative of Japanese International Cooperation Agency, Mr. Inoue Yoichi-san, the development partners and support partners in the room present, representatives of ministries, departments, and agencies present, senior government officials present, fellow academicians, researchers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, distinguished guests, both online and physically here, media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon. I feel very privileged to stand here before you. I'm also a fellow researcher working together with a number of academic institutions around, business incubators around, and I promote innovators. So, on behalf of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, we are humbled to join you in this Uganda Innovation Week, whose aim is to strengthen the startup ecosystem in Uganda. And this does not only recognize the startups, but also promotes or builds the culture of innovation and system of collaboration within the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. I wish to salute JICA and the organizers, the Startup Uganda, and other organizations in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Ministry of ICT for providing the space and other activities, for the extensive initiative during this National Innovation Week in undertaking, supporting and strengthening entrepreneurs or startups in the creation of synergies to promote technology, product development, and innovations. We are all aware that in this competitive landscape, innovation is the only engine that can keep us thriving. You can have all the ideas, as you have seen in the presentations, but if they don't come out, if they don't hit the market, if they don't solve our problems, if they are not useful to our society, then we keep there counting that we have innovations. I know the challenges we face in the country. I know that we have issues of the patenting, the intellectual property rights, and other areas. But with the support from JICA and other partners, I think we are starting the journey to make sure that our startups, the infant stage startups, will be able to leapfrog and be counted among other countries, as you have seen. If we can be able to attract the venture capitalists, if we can be able to penetrate the markets, and therefore simplify our livelihoods. I think as Uganda, you are aware that the largest population of Uganda is dominated by the youth. And these are trainable youth, graduates. So I know that they are very talented with ideas. And in this era of digitization, there's nothing that should stop us from continuing to innovate. So we are here to witness the launch of the Support to Entrepreneurship and Startup Ecosystem Strengthening Advisory Project. This project is in line with our Uganda Vision 2040, NDP 3 for adoption of solutions in innovation, entrepreneurship, digitization, with the objectives to increase job creation, exports, and market of value-added products. The Ministry of Trade is mandated to formulate, review, and support policies, plans, and programs that promote and ensure expansion and diversification of trade, cooperatives, environmentally sustainable industrialization, technology development and transfer, in order to eradicate poverty and benefit the country socially and economically. So I think the ministry is doing its mandate to make sure that we take lead in promoting entrepreneurship and startups. As we transition to the NDP 4, I remind you that the Uganda aims to become a middle-income country by the end of NDP 3 period, 2030. And this is hinged on the sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and sustainable wealth creation. For this to be achieved, it is imperative to strengthen international competitiveness through the aggregation of industries, entrepreneurs, who will then lead to sustainable economic development. The NDP 3 currently that we are running is expected to be achieved through a number of programs. And among these programs, we have private sector development, digital transformation and innovation, technology development and transfer. And in all these three programs, startup support is important and is a cross-cutting theme. Government of Uganda has already recognized the importance of startups and is in the process of putting up an enabling environment, in this case, the policy and the law for their growth, so that we can continue benefiting more. As you have seen, we are following other countries, but we are also doing all that it takes to make sure that our youth and innovators can keep competitive. Definitely you have heard all from His Excellency the President, the spirit he has to support innovators, scientists, and all other enterprises to make sure that we put Uganda on the world map. Despite initiatives of both government and private sector, many startups that are in the seed or pre-seed stage still need support to grow into competitiveness, into competitive companies. And what is lacking here, because you have seen even if our policies is to provide the infrastructure, we are working on the digital frameworks, the connectivity, but still we need to work on the competencies and the capabilities. And these are definitely the other soft core of the mindset. The mindset change is very key here because innovators, entrepreneurs cannot tire. They have to continue taking risks. They have to accept that failure is a part of doing business. As innovators, definitely you cannot give up. So let's continue working together in that space. The objectives of this project will include enhancing the capacity of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives and enhancing the accelerator programs and enterprise support organizations to promote the innovations, research and development ecosystem. The ministry, with the support from JICA, will take the lead but collaborate with other MDAs and startup organizations during the implementation of the project. Let me once again thank JICA for their contribution to this space, to the community focused on initiatives and support programs contributing to sustainable development and growth of startups through implementing solutions to various challenges in the entrepreneurship, digitization, and other areas towards the prosperity of our society. The ministry is committed to continue working with the development partners to support the micro, small, medium enterprises and startups to drive the benefits of creating jobs, increasing exports, and ultimately contributing to the economic growth and development of this country. At this juncture, let me thank you all for listening, and I say this for God and my country. Thank you.
Mr. Dr. Joshua, you have a more important thing to do, which is unveil whatever is behind there, so that we can endorse this relationship by signing, and we shall be the witnesses to this marriage. So if you could please unveil, and we'll call up the partners in this program to officially launch this. So you can abandon those things there, and you can walk over on this side. You can all hashtag that you were here when this relationship started, and once the call happens next year, we shall hold them accountable to what we just signed today. All right. Can I cue up some celebration background?
Thank you.
It is official. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, in partnership with JICA, signing the launch of the Entrepreneurship Support and Startup Ecosystem Strengthening Project. better round of applause, please. Thank you very, very much, and we're excited to see this happen. And since this was a conversation about collaboration, I'm going to ask Startup Uganda to come up here alongside JICA and the ministry for a photo moment. So please, the team from JICA, the team from the ministry, if you could please stand here in collaboration with Startup Uganda that's making this happen, so we can endorse and showcase the collaboration story that's going to happen in the future. All right. We're heading to the last part of this conversation that's going to be moderated by Raymond Asimwe. If you could please come up here and you will introduce your panel and we'll dive right into it. And you have a lot of pressure because you'll be standing between us and lunch. So you need to make sure the conversation is right on point, exciting, enough to match us into our lunch. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I know the spirits are a bit low, but I'll try to get them up. So this afternoon, we have a panel on strategies for strengthening Uganda's startup ecosystem to foster the growth of Series A, B, and C startups. We seem to see a lot of early stage companies raise some bit of money, and then they plateau at a certain level. And beyond that, we are not seeing them raise Series A or Series B or C funding. So this afternoon, thanks to our new partners, we want to dissect that and understand what the problem might be. So join me in welcoming the panel this afternoon. We have Oketayot Vincent Okema. Vincent is a member of the technical working group that is trying to develop the Uganda startup policy and maybe eventually the act. Join me also in welcoming George William Baker, a founder of Patasente and CEO, a veteran in this ecosystem, I must say, one of the earliest founders that I know. We also have Lois Warui from the venture design lead. She's a venture design lead at Future Lab. And then we also have Barbara Kasekende, and she's the head of business advisory, the Uganda Development Bank. And then we also have Innocent Frederick Eloju. He's in charge of partnerships and innovation at the UNDP. I think there's one other person, yes. There's Anthony Bwenje, the digital for development expert from Enabel. So as you'll notice, I haven't spent time introducing these people. So I think a very good way to start is not to ruin their profiles. They'll introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get right into it, starting with George all the way to Vincent.
George Baka, I'm the General Manager at Pata Center. We are a digital trade services platform trying to facilitate trade around Uganda, East Africa, and the world. Yes, happy to be here. Thanks.
Good afternoon, guys. Why did the panel have to be at the end right before lunch? But we'll try to make it as exciting as possible for you so that you get value. My name is Barbara Kasekende. My mantra is every morning I wake up, I ensure women find their voice, and young people like you own this space and this narrative. My job is I head the business advisory department at Uganda Development Bank, but what I enjoy doing is seeing young people thrive. Esawa ezafiziweddewo, esawa kati yammwe.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Tumuhami. I work as Head of Exploration and Program Analyst at the United Nations Development Program, but I'm also the startup ecosystem focal point person at UNDP.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Bwenje, and I'm a digital and innovation expert with Enable in the Ugandan portfolio. Good to have you.
Hello, Uganda. My name is Lois Waroe. I'm part of the Innovation Village. I take care of our startups as I love Barbara's energy, and I'm also very, very passionate about access to finance and the growth of the overall startup ecosystem. It is a pleasure to be sharing with you today.
Good afternoon, guests. My name is Vincent Okema from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, where I serve as the Deputy Chairman on the Technical Working Group on the National Startup Policy, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'll also introduce myself briefly. Raymond Asimwe. I'm a lawyer. I work with Bytelex. I've been around like forever in this startup ecosystem, way back to the days of Mara Launchpad. Way back. So I've seen, the last 10 years, it's been interesting to see how the ecosystem has evolved. I think a very good way to start is with policy. And I think one of the things that we want to achieve with this project is to create interventions for policy. And I think one of the things that we would want to know from Vincent, could you kind of give us a rundown of what the government is doing? This is a space that has been ignored for long. What is the government doing, and what are their intentions for it?
Thank you very much, Raymond, for that question. I need to give a disclaimer before I enter this. I'm a bit shaky because I actually broke a chair like this today. So I'm a bit shaky because of that. But anyway, to dive into it, I need to give you perspective of where this journey started from. This policy that we are implementing actually came from the ecosystem. It was an initiative of the ecosystem. It was an initiative of Private Sector Foundation together with the Innovation Village, who held a policy dialogue, and actually a high policy dialogue, which came up with a position paper that was presented to the ministry for consideration. It then went through the processes, and a technical working group was appointed by the ministry to pursue it. Our initial role then was to implement what they call a regulatory impact assessment report that would then inform the ministry and government at large the direction they would take with startups. This report had a few primary things that it had to do. One, it had to define a startup in the Ugandan context. And secondly, it had to find out what unique challenges are in this animal called a startup. What is causing these challenges? What are the effects? And what is the impact of startups on our country, in our economy? This technical working group has carried out so many activities in this engagement. We've had a national engagement on our roadmap. We've engaged nationally. We've gone to all the four corners of the country and had also a central engagement here for consultation purposes. We have also done a lot of capacity building through organizations like Information for Policy. That is a regional body that has been helping countries like ours to implement startup policies. We also had capacity building with the hubs. The hubs have helped us a lot in understanding what these startups are. These were very important milestones for us. We also had capacity building with the Cabinet Secretariat. The Cabinet Secretariat are the custodians of policy in the country. So they took us through guidelines of how we can implement this RIA report. I'd like to, at this juncture, report that in May of this year, the report was sanctioned. They gave us permission to do a policy. In the shortest time possible, they gave us up to December to implement a policy. Along the way also, we have had strategic engagements. One of them obviously being with JICA, where we had extensive discussions, especially in two areas. One was on how to build the ministry's capacity to intervene in startups. The second one was how can we crowd the ecosystem, which then culminated into the project that we are launching today, and we are grateful for that. We also had another engagement with KOICA, the Koreans, and ITC, where we had an information sharing engagement, a very extensive one, that took us into a benchmarking tour that ended recently, which came out with very interesting results about our ecosystem. I see I'm being time kept, but I'll continue a bit. I'm about to finish. So we've had those milestones, and by
Vincent,
December...
I don't know if your microphone is on. You're a bit faint.
Oh, we've had those engagements, and by December of this year, we shall have a draft policy in place, and then we'll go on to the next steps. I hope that brings you up to speed with what is happening on the government side. But over and above that, I would like to say that entrepreneurship development has always been carried out by the ministry. As Dr. Joshua mentioned, we have an MSME policy in place and various other policies that encourage entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. One of the things that has been inspiring as a member of the technical working group is seeing the growth mindset that the members have. They're willing to learn and accept this space. So I can vouch and say that it's been a very transformative journey. See them adopt these things. I think you saw Dr. Mtambi here talking about pre-seed and seed stage startups. That's something that has been a transformative journey for the ministry. The other thing that I thought would be useful is for the rest of the members to chip in. So we have, entrepreneurs, we have people from, the entrepreneur support organizations, Warui, I can see you. And we have representatives from the investors. What, if you're to think of one or two things that the policy should address, what would those be? starting with you, George.
Yeah, thanks, Raymond. I think my views are a little bit generic. You have policy, that's important. But I think there is also issues around capacity, right? So what's the existing capacity within the companies that we run to actually grow? But also, what's the existing capacity around us that can actually support that growth? So if you asked me what that looks like, I want to see the policy increasing the capacity of the ESOs to actually grow the ecosystem, right? If Richard is running a startup center, does he have enough money to invest in he who believes will be the best startup of the future? That's just one, right? Same thing with Innovation Village, same thing with Design Hub. So for example, other than government basically getting funds and running them through Stanbic, Centenary to finance startups, get the ESOs and have them invest in these places. That's one. Then I think the other is simply around, again, still on capacity, right? Of the businesses themselves, right? To then actually grow. If the ESOs are capacitated enough, and I don't think they are, then they're in position to actually take active investment in the startups they believe have capacity to grow. So that's one. Then the second part is just the participation of government in procurement of startup products, right? Why should you give a $5 million contract to somebody from I don't know where to build a local system, a startup in Outbox or Innovation Village or anywhere can actually do? And when that doesn't happen, then you have so many young people who are building very innovative solutions which nobody actually buys or utilizes. That's the second one, right? So that's the capacity of the market. Then the other one is a little bit capacity internally, which is not to the ESOs or even government, just us who are running these businesses. Do we have internal capacity to utilize or to discover new things and bring them out to the market? And I think there we are still lacking because we are not, in my opinion, producing a lot of new knowledge products that actually are necessitated in the market. But also that might come from if everybody around us is investing in these places to do that, then that happens. And a good way to do that is to be able to fund low spending. Before any beautiful startup you see, whether Tesla or Google or anybody else comes up with a really productive solution, there is a lot of investment that has gone into them to do a lot of low spending before they arrive at what they call a product market fit. And I'm afraid the budgets which are being put into these startups to discover those things are not there, right? So if you do $10,000, $20,000, no, that's not enough. You need to invest minimum $1 million within a startup to actually get it to the space where it has a product that can actually be scaled. Then the other is still around markets. If we can sort of on issues around markets.
George, I think I might want to cut you
sure.
short so that you give the others a chance. And members, if you can just restrict yourself to at least 2 or 3 points, max. Yeah.
But I think George has a point, and he's the entrepreneur in the room. The rest of us are above that. But I like the essence of where we started. At the end of the day, government has to give us direction, which it has done. Government can only do so much. Now, let me wear the hat of the investor under government, okay? So that policy has been put in place. We are the implementers of that policy from a funding perspective. And this is the ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Now, from Uganda Development Bank, for example, we are the only development bank in the country, and our shareholder is purely government. Banange, this is not PDM, Emyoga, no, okay? We're talking about instruments to help your businesses grow, equity and debt. I'm not going to talk about those because right now we don't have time and I'm not here to pitch. But what I'm here to tell you is government has found a way to reach out to you to ensure that at least in the avenues of getting access to patient capital, there is Uganda Development Bank, but in particular focus areas. So we cannot be everywhere, but we're in particular focus areas. So people in technology and ICT, yay. Agriculture, food basket, yay. You know, tourism, yay. Manufacturing, yay. So we are in those spaces that matter to you. I think now what we should really be talking about is capacity. I have my enterprise. It has started. Munyamba mutya. How do you help me? Where do I go to find those linkages? And by the way, guys, linkages is not just you come, you work through an acceleration program, they give you seed capital, and you stop. That is why most of our enterprises are dying today. We come, I go to Zulu there, I am like, you know, Richard, outbox, I have a beautiful acceleration, I get a certificate, I think I have arrived. And that is the problem that a lot of our small, we're told him where your section, a lot of our, a lot of our entrepreneurs are facing. And I think for me, I know we don't have time, but I think the thing here for me, which is a takeaway as I end, when you're looking for avenues in which to grow as an entrepreneur, the avenue you're looking for has to help you put your idea on paper, has to help you grow your idea, has to help you find the funding to implement your idea, then tie you to the funder, UDB, to fund your idea, then tie you to the right mentors to handhold and work with you so that that idea becomes a reality that transforms change. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. The question was, where do you see the missing link in policy? What should we address?
Okay, thank you so much. For me, I'll focus more on what the United Nations system is trying to do to support the ecosystem. The United Nations in Uganda is implementing what we call the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. And it's under this framework that we've worked to support the government of Uganda to implement the National Development Plan 3. Under this, the United Nations Development Program is actually focusing on key priority areas to support the startup ecosystem with issues around digitalization and innovation. And under this, given that a number of support has been getting towards the software to enable the ecosystem thrive, there has been less investment in the hardware in terms of government being in charge of the ecosystem to grow. And what is it that we've done to support the government to build this hardware? In the digitalization aspect, in August, most of you heard about the launch of the National Digital Transformation Roadmap. So the United Nations system was able to support the government of Uganda to implement its Digital Uganda Vision 2040 by developing a strategy that would help Uganda implement its digitalization strategy through the was developed with 5 pillars that you've heard the PS talk about over time. So this is going to help us have issues to do with cybersecurity. If you're developing the technology-related startup, how are you going to be supported to be able to work out your strategy without aspects to do with the digital security, issues to do with the innovation and startup are part of the 5 pillars of this strategy, and also other areas. So this has been one of the critical aspects that was very important for us to be able to implement the strategy. The second issue that we've been supporting the government to do in terms of the hardware was to support the current spaces that government has established so that they are able to support the ecosystem. One of these has been the establishment of the Makerere University Innovation Port. It's not an innovation space like what we have currently for the different innovation spaces that we have, but we are looking at a space where things must be done. So we have procured an equipment worth 5 billion for Makerere University to support the startup ecosystem. What is this space going to help us do? One is that we are going to have electric vehicle testing equipment at Makerere University because the world is going electric. But how do we support our ecosystem to test a number of these ideas with an equipment that is able to help? Instead of having an innovator or an entrepreneur travel to Europe to test an idea, this is now going to be done at Makerere University, working with the private sector. What is it that is also going to be done? We are going to have a CNC workshop, which is fully equipped for our entrepreneurs to test their ideas with this equipment. Because this is where we are lacking. A number of our innovators, a number of our startup support organizations, we are more focusing on, yes, we give you seed funding, but if you have an idea to test it that requires a lot of support, you have to travel to Europe, you have to travel to America. So now we have procured this heavy equipment that is going to help us do testing of all our prototypes within here at Makerere University. So this is going to be launched in January, and we shall be able to do this. We've been strengthening the ecosystem here at the National ICT Innovation Hub. We've been able to refurbish this space. The space that you're in is now attractive because government established it, but it required some twist to make it more attractive to entrepreneurs. And that's what we are trying to focus on as the United Nations system, to enable the spaces that government has created so that they are able to attract our entrepreneurs and then be able to be used. Lastly, we've also been supporting the assessments for the startup ecosystem to identify the gaps that need investment. We have a strategy that has been developed. Part of the policy that is being championed by the Ministry of Trade came from the assessment that we conducted and realized that the current policy that we have was focusing more on SMEs and MSMEs with less focus on the startups. So how do we create a policy that is going to help our startups get incentives, our people who have investments come and invest in our startups, instead of having a policy that is veiled around the small and medium enterprises. So we've also been able to support the government to come up with that national strategy on startups, and a number of the activities that we see are actually focusing on that, on the implementation of that strategy. And I'm happy that JICA is supporting a number of these activities that were identified in the strategy that was developed with support from the United Nations Development Program. The last aspect that we are going to be doing as the United Nations system is to enable the innovation ecosystem within the public universities, because universities are centers of innovations. So we are having a lot of focus in establishing a lot of spaces within the universities, not working spaces, but trying to do hardware, establishing hardware systems within universities so that these young innovators in universities are able to test their products. In Ikabale, we've actually established a business incubation center that is going to focus on adding value on Irish potato. And the equipment has already been procured to enable students and faculty be able to come up with businesses around value addition on Irish, because that's the niche of the university. We are doing an assessment for Guru University, for other universities according to the different regions, so that we are able to establish the hardware components that speak to the niche of the different regions in the country, and we'll be able to support the government to be able to establish those investments within the different spaces. Thank you.
Yeah, but maybe before we move on, you raise quite a bit of points, and hearing you speak, it makes it seem that the ecosystem is really active. There's a lot of things going on. But one theme that keeps coming up on the technical working group that I'm on for the startup policy is that there isn't enough transparency to access some of these facilities. What are you doing towards enabling people access? So I'll give you an example. For instance, this National Innovation Hub. Most founders say that it's a few that can access it. So with all the different programs that you're doing, how are you baking in ways for everyone, someone in Moroto, as long as they're innovative, to be able to access these facilities?
Thank you so much. That's a very good question. The assessment clearly identified one of the gaps as coordination of initiatives that are being implemented by the different partners. And to be able to strengthen this aspect, 2 recommendations were made. One was to kind of establish a coordination unit that involves all implementing partners within the startup ecosystem. And 2 ministries were identified to coordinate this initiative, working with other development partners. Ministry of Trade and Ministry of ICT were clearly identified as potential ministries that would help on the side of government to coordinate the initiatives that are being done. And with this, for us, we've been able, as the United Nations system, able to create what we call the program boards. The program board is now bringing all the responsible partners within this ecosystem together. This week, we had a meeting that was chaired by the Minister of ICT, but was bringing players within the government system that are working within the ecosystem as part of that initiative. So we will be able to work with the rest through, like, for example, EU4D is going to help us to coordinate a number of initiatives that are working around the startup ecosystem. The second recommendation was on a database, or what we call a portal, that is going to help us kind of know who is who within the startup ecosystem. So we've worked with the Ministry of ICT to initially develop a startup ecosystem portal that is going to help us document whatever is happening within the startup ecosystem. This is going to document the startup support organizations. They're going to help us to document or kind of do a database for who is helping startups in this country. And then everyone, it will be like a one-stop center. I saw as part of the activities that were included in the JICA project was a database. We don't need that anymore because there is already a portal and a database that is being developed by the Ministry of ICT with support from the United Nations system. What we only need is to now review that portal and then be able to see what gaps does it have and how can we strengthen that. So with that, it is going to help us to coordinate the different initiatives that are happening within the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Anthony, could you maybe just quickly take us through what Enabel has been doing and what they would want from the policy-making side?
Okay, thank you. Enabel has been engaged in various activities aimed at supporting the startups, and maybe a few that I can share. Challenges, we have had challenges where startups come and pitch, and they win some grants. Recently, we were celebrating the award prize, where someone won around 50,000 euros. And some people know the WeHabit project. So mostly we support startups through grants, but we have also had other interventions where we are engaged in infrastructure. For instance, we've built around 7 hubs, digital innovation hubs in Karamoja, in Hoima. We always aim at last mile interventions because mostly when we are talking about ecosystem, people look at the urban centers. But trust me, even people in Karamoja, in Moroto, for example, in Nakapiripirit, they have something to contribute to the ecosystem. So we are always focused on last mile, and we've built hubs in Fort Portal to make sure that if an innovator, for instance, is doing his research and is in Kabale or Karamoja, can they get a place, a safe space where they can do some research? can innovators in Karamoja also have something to do to support them in their journey? So we have also been in skilling. There are projects where we have direct interventions, and we've had a chance to develop some of the startups from ideation up to the level of taking off. And as I speak now, some of them are here, and we are continuing to support them to give them a platform. And they will be in Nairobi to pitch in the Latitude 59 conference, where they will have investors. So our support is usually through partnerships. We've had partnerships with most of these hubs, and we also have partnerships with government. Ours is not so direct like some of like Barbara's, but ours is through partnerships mostly. So for this policy, I would want to see the sustainability of startups. I would want government to clearly spell out how they are going to make sure that if a startup is growing, it is not retarded. I would want to see interventions in terms of marketing, because we have seen some governments actually support their startups by taking them to international expos to make sure that they have that platform. I would also want to see the government clearly spell out what a startup is. Because as we are speaking now, some people confuse a startup and an SME. So I would want to see what a startup looks like in terms of government, in terms of policy, because I believe a startup has different needs from an SME. But most people will think, okay, if we have funds from government, they can help both startups and SME, which is not true. So I would want that separation to be clear. But most importantly, I would want to see government's role throughout the life cycle of an innovation. Because in most cases, even us, like the development agency, all hubs, they will have short-term programs which will last for a year or two. So what? So I would want to see government answer the so what, because good startups last for even 10 years. You can spend 10 years being a startup. So if I'm Enable and I've given you maybe a grant of 2 years, so what happens after that? So I would want to see a clear link between a startup that is growing and a startup that is maturing, and by clearly defining how that process will be. Because if you ask startups, some of them will tell you, I'm grown. But is it the true definition of growth? So I would want the policy to clearly define all that, so that if we are coming with our support, because we are having a deliberate effort as Enable to work with startups, to make sure that we integrate them in some of our programming. But what kind of startup are we looking at? Thank you.
Thank you as well, Anthony. Warui,
Yeah.
you're
So,
in a very privileged
very
position.
brief.
Let me just ask, in a privileged position to support these companies as an entrepreneur support organization. The question really is, what's been your experience? Where are the challenges? I know for a fact that there's overtraining and a lot of capacity building from your side as ESOs. Where is the missing link? What should change in the ESO model right now to support the ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I think there's a lot that can be done in the space of ESOs. Definitely, there's a lot of duplication going on. Case in example, about the database that is already existing, ministry is already working on getting another database. We are seeing ESOs that are doing the exact same thing. They are next door to each other. They are not openly talking, and there's a lot of silo mentality that is happening. And it's just perceived competition, which is really hurting the ecosystem instead of helping us to come together and build each other up. So I think that is one thing that needs to be tackled. There's also another thing about our startups and how we enabling them. So in terms of the quality of startups that we churn, we as the SEOs, I will be brave, and I know maybe I might get some rocks thrown at me. It is true, gold in, gold out. So ESOs they have to admit that we might need a little bit of support when it comes to training, because the entrepreneurs are depending on your expertise. And I'm very happy that now we are seeing a lot of delegations. Ethiopians are coming maybe to Kenya to benchmark. They're coming to Uganda to benchmark. There's a lot of VC training happening. There's a lot of training for entrepreneur support organizations that is being rolled out. And I really think it's a very good initiative. But I also think that not only is it government or ESOs or DFIs to push this, corporates also have a responsibility of getting behind this. And this has been seen by, people like MTN, people like UNOC, they're spurring and pushing for innovation. So how are the corporates as well speaking into innovation, even internally, in-house? And this will help us to solve a lot of problems. So we are seeing other things like access to finance. Of course, that has always been a big issue. Accessibility, inequalities that exist because someone cannot travel to come all the way here, then they might not get the same quality of support just because they're disadvantaged because they live far. I think there's a lot of adoption that needs to be made in terms of technology and how we are utilizing it, how we are putting it into play. And I think the government still has a lot of work to do together with development partners in terms of building infrastructure and building capacity, because at the end of the day, we need highly, highly qualified people that will help us build high quality startups. Because then, how are our startups? Our youth have all these great ideas, and I know there's an interplay between academia and startups. But then again, how do we capacitate our youth so that they're able to churn out very good quality, world-class startups and solutions? So there's really a lot that can be done, and I'm happy that we have all the players here. And I'm happy that this conversation is happening, because that is always the start of us doing things different.
Thank you, Warui. Barbara, you raised a couple of interesting points, right? So yours is a two-part question. UDB. Where to start from? When you look at your website, there's so much you promise for founders. I don't know how many tech startups you've funded. I could be wrong. Maybe they're there. But how are you positioning yourself for this new age? You must accept that tech startups are not normal companies. So how are you positioning yourself to fund these kinds of companies as UDB? That's one. Two, you mentioned quite a bit about the kind of program that you would want, or accelerator program that you'd want, that would produce results. Could you tell us, if you were given a chance to design one, how that would look like?
But okay, starting with the first question, UDB. First and foremost, I need to explain something. When we talk about a development bank is not a commercial bank. So you can't come to Uganda Development Bank and open an account. We are not a transactional bank, okay? We invest in entities, or what you would say, businesses, okay? So I want to get that out of the way. But now, when you talk about UDB and if we have supported startups, yes, we have. And our products or our instruments, we have equity and we also have debt, okay? We don't do grants. I am very sorry. There now you can look to the other development partners that we have here. And why are we doing that? I like what one of our panelists has said. It's nice to have two women on the panel. We are trying to make sure that the startups that are actually coming up are startups that are solutioning for the problems we are facing today. Not a problem I'm going to face 20 years from now. So yes, we do have quite a number of startups that we have supported. However, When you come to the bank, it's not just about giving you money to access finance. That it's not about the money, or it's not about the loan. We're all about transforming and improving the livelihoods of Ugandans. Ugandans, I have to stress that. Okay? So one of the things we do are non-financial interventions. And that's where partnerships, for example, what JICA is doing, what the High Innovator Program is doing, all those are partnerships we have on board, because honestly, we cannot talk about startups when we do not talk about preparing startups to access finance. So Uganda Development Bank, of course, someone will say, but you're not reachable, you're high in the clouds, you only support, the bigger companies and so on and so forth. So briefly, now I have to talk about this so you can understand the context. As a bank, our products are twofold. The first one is, of course, being a development finance institution, we do not do smaller monies. So if we are to invest in your business, the starting, especially for our young entrepreneurs, is around 50 million Uganda shillings, up to 920. However, if you move over to the SME space, it can be 1 billion up to 20 million US dollars, depending on how big you are. However, someone will say, 50, I want to start with 10. No problem. Now, that is where we structure programs where, for example, if you are part of an association or a group or a cooperative, we then come and do what we would call apex lending. So you come as your group, you are, dairy farmers, and you want 100 million, but you have 50 or 100 members in your group. We lend to your association or cooperative in our focus areas, and then you can on-lend to your members. But for me, honestly, when we talk about UDB and all these interventions, is the non-financial. Non-financial is where I actually sit. That is what I love doing every day. We have two programs. One is the Enterprise Development Program in partnership actually with MOOBS, the Entrepreneurship Center, and the other one is the Business Acceleration Program. All our programs in the bank are done with partners. So if you want to come and Barbara will do it alone, everything we do with an ecosystem. So when a startup comes, 99.9% of the time, you're coming through our partners like Zulu here, High Innovator, you come through, and then we're able to take you on at the point at which you need debt or equity. We actually have one that passed through your program, JICA, which was wonderful, and he's doing really well, that took on our equity instrument. So yes, all those things are there, but I think the whole essence of these discussions is having all the partners in one room so that the startups or the entrepreneurs in this room can join the dots. Government cannot work alone. The DFIs cannot work alone. Development partners cannot work alone. We all need each other, but most importantly, the startups or the entrepreneurs need to understand that ecosystem. You can't just blame government. Government does policy, and then you have implementers that feed into the policy. On our side, we are the people that handle the investment side of government. So yes, we will invest in your enterprise. At the end of the day, let me change to Luganda, Banja, Esente Sizizo. I have to change the language, yes? So we have to prepare you to absorb that money so that your enterprise can, I will talk about social and economic change. If you're not causing transformation as a startup, as an enterprise, then we cannot come in to support you. I hope that kind of gives context.
It does, but as a follow-up, remember I asked you to kind of design a program for the accelerator that you would want to see the transformation you're talking about. So what would the program look like?
That I would want as Barbara? Okay, well, the accelerator we are looking at, actually most startups are twofold. You have what they would call incubation. Incubation, you're new, you have an idea, you do not know what to do with the idea. The way I would look at incubation, when you come in, you get the idea from my head, you help me put it down on paper, you help me structure it all the way from what I am supposed to do as an individual to the team I need to what I need to do for that to happen. And when you structure that for me, you then show me how to become compliant. Okay? Because compliance is very critical. Compliance, registration, what does that entail? Is the taxman out to steal from me, or is there a benefit of me paying taxes? Things like that. What does that entail? Once I have that, you then give me the right processes I need to run my what? My enterprise. When you give me those processes, they require a certain kind of, what do you call it, capacity, money, okay? Then that's where players especially who give seed capital or what you'd call startup capital, come and help me to make sure that actually those processes are in place. Once I have started moving and I am actually seeing some kind of return, okay, in what I have put in, then maybe at that level I am ready to access finance. At the point at which I am ready to access finance, and that is where now the acceleration comes in to see how best we can accelerate that, they then help me build what you'd call build my file to be able to be attractive to what you'd call investors. At that point, then you attract investors like Uganda Development Bank to come and invest in your entity. But for me, if you talk about the structure, I'm sure a lot of us here understand what that means. Bottom line, it has to start with the mindset. Are you actually solutioning for the right market? Because at the end of the day, it is return on investment. If what you are solutioning for, you're not going to solve a problem now, then you are not solutioning. And I wouldn't put you in the startup phase. The whole point of having a startup is because I am solutioning. As an investor, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, where is your market? Why am I asking for market? Because I need a return on my what? On my investment, okay? So if you're talking about structure, we could talk about this all day. But for me, in essence, that is it. Solution. Once you solution, find the conduit or partner to help you put that on a paper, to help you structure it, to give you the first, what you would call financial capacity to go through it, then link you to an investor, and then continue holding your hand until you tell them, Abafe, I think I have arrived. Let's go.
Wow. Thank you, Barbara. I think from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of, if there's capacity building, it should go with the money, and then the money helps you de-risk your project, you get to another level, ask for more money, and continue growing down the line.
Yes, exactly. But at the end of the day, it starts with solutioning for the right problem. Because you might go through all that, but because there's no market, what happens? The business is done to dust because you have no market. Then I have to come to you and tell you, give me back my money. Or JICA says, now this program is not working, you're out of it. Or High Innovator says, okay, fine, it was lovely, but you drop out of the program, and then we come back to complaining again. Are you solutioning? Is your problem, actually, it's a problem you're solutioning for there, today, now, and does it have a market?
Yeah, okay. So George, I see you laughing, and I think it's a very good point to transition to. Let's think about the typical life cycle of an entrepreneur in this market, startup entrepreneur. You look for grants, they begin to tap out, you exhaust family and friends, and you run out at some point. I guess the question here is, that's the story for most startups, and they're going to plateau at some point after they've run out of the grants, the family and friends, and fools, as they call it. How do you scale up? You know, where is the missing link? What should happen? Because I believe you're at that stage now. You've seen it all, and you're looking to probably grow. At the growth stage, what would you want to see more that you can say, I wish this was there to make things a little bit easier?
Yeah, thanks, Raymond. I think somebody put up a slide up here where they showed very many participants at the very early seed stage and very little participants at everything else. So the reason that is so, first of all, I'm running a company. The threshold for an African-led run business to get investment from form of venture capital is quite high, because already there is a lot of mistrust around your ability to actually build that company. Right? So you have to demonstrate quite highly that you have the ability to actually build and scale this business before you get formal investment. But to Barbara, she's saying a lot around solutioning. I want you to come to me when you have a product that is fit, that has a market. I'm part of the UDB process now, but the threshold for getting investment from UDB is quite high. And what I'm saying is the people who, and I think the commissioner mentioned it, he said it's okay to fail. Somebody has to fund that okay to fail. And the person who can fund that okay to fail is the ESO. Right now, while we are saying we are doing lots of training and support, it's because the funding they are getting is for that. So, if Barbara, on your big budget, you can allocate 100 billion, distribute it 10-10 to each of the ESOs and tell them, do the funding of failure. And bring me 2 or 3 startups that I can do a follow investment in. And for me, what I want to see in the space is a consciousness where all of us get interested in building our institutions. I think she mentioned it, we are working in silos and everybody is doing whatever they are doing. It's because the consciousness is not coming up where we say, let us build the institutions that we have in the country. The threshold becomes a little bit high. So that's what I would say. The reason why you are not seeing so many guys participating there and why you are running out is because the funding available to get to this is the solution that I want to scale out in the market is not yet sufficient. So you hear things like, we are doing scale-up funding. You have won $20,000. What's that? It's a joke. I'm being honest. Right? So, and for me, now that Barbara is here, UDB is best placed because you understand the national development agenda to actually put on spot the ESOs and say, this is the feed that I actually need. Then how all these ESOs would make an exit if I did an investment in a young startup that UDB goes on to invest in, then I exit. Right? Who is funding fast loss? Right now, that's why I like JICA, I like UNCDF, I like some of these MCA, because they are funding that fast loss, but they are doing to the extent that they can. Right? But UDB? Do more. Thanks.
I think on that bombshell, you want to respond?
The journey is already here. We are already doing that. We've already started. That's why I have a job. That's what I do. So, but it is one step at a time, and I'm glad that you've mentioned that. And I will take personal interest in your project. But we're already doing that. We're already having the partnerships and doing what's needed. Proactivity is two-sided, or it's two-way. You come halfway, we also come, we also come halfway, but it's already in the works. That's what the business advisory department in the bank is doing. And these are the partnerships that we are creating. That's why I'm here with the JICA team. So, tulifena.
Thank you, Barbara. I think at this point, I would like to invite the audience for a few questions, because our time is fast spent. Maybe we can have about 3 questions. So I'm going to have Donald, then I'm going to have the lady over there. Wow. No, we need to do 4. Him. Okay, the usual suspect. Okay, so Donald, him, the 2 ladies there. Let's do 4. Yeah, gender balance. Okay.
Starting with unusual suspects.
Thank you so much, the panelists, for such a wonderful discussion. I only have 2 brief questions. Mine first goes to UDB. I like the fact that you are a very good marketeer, but now we are startups. There's a long line that is required for us to even access even the money that is being discussed. And I know you talked about the fact that it's not about the money, but I know that I have tried, I work with the Academy for Women Entrepreneurs, so I have tried a line of women that have totally failed to get UDB money. So maybe, yes, the money is there, which is a good thing, but maybe you could also advise the thresholds that we should look at and what is required and the alternatives that we can consider as startups if we fail to get UDB. Because I know it's not easy to get UDB money, it's not at all. Number two is that I'm very shocked about the fact that all of us sat and said, we don't need this, or we need this, or we need this, when we were talking about JICA, not you, when we were talking about JICA and Ministry of Trade. We are spending money on things that already exist. Couldn't we have done a background check and also spent on things that we do not have, so that when money is already allocated, now I'm starting to think, how is it going to happen that money has already been released, and someone mentioned that there's already a system that we want to develop. I think there's something they call coordination, even with our policy and implementers and development partners, that we get affected, but this is something that could have been handled at an upper level. So I would want Ministry of Trade to comment on that. What happens now that we already have the database? Do we divert the money to giving startups startup capital? How are you going to be able to handle that?
My name is Sandra Awili, and mine is along the lines of policy and at what point does the voice of the startups really start to matter? Because when the elephants fight, of course, the grass will suffer, yeah? And at this point, as startups, we are feeling like the grass. When you're talking about ecosystem players and policymakers working in silos, you're building policies that are going to affect us directly, and they're going to hit us hard. And when all is said and done, our businesses are going to struggle. And remember, you need the startups to survive for the economy to grow, yeah? The startups are building opportunities that will employ the young people of Uganda. They will create collaborations with other countries, fostering international relationships. We are already doing this. But my problem is, a lot of the times I'm hearing policy this, policy that, we are introducing this, we are introducing that. At what point do you sit down and want to actually listen to us and the challenges we are facing and where the inefficiencies actually are? Recently, I'm having to redo my URSB registration because, as we say, garbage in, garbage out. I am being told that my paperwork was not filed correctly. Why was it certified then? Yeah? So these are the structural challenges we are facing. And if you're going to sit there and tell us what to do and what you're doing, at some point, consider the fact that we are the ones facing these challenges. We know them in and out. We face them every day. And some of you have never run businesses in your lives. So please, invite us to the table and hear from us. This is my humble plea.
Thanks, John. My name is Donald. I have a couple of questions. First to Barbara. I went to UDB a few years ago, and the lady I spoke to said, number one, we only give out big chunks of money to big companies, and you must have landed property to access our money. So, small players, startups typically don't. Now, you're talking about equity, and I've checked your website, there's an equity fund, but there are no further details, like how much equity do you take? You just mentioned how much you give out between 15K US to about 250K, but what are the other requirements? How many startups have got this money? I only know like one. How much work are you doing to reach out to get people to know that UDB actually has money for startups, because a lot of people think that you only have money for big companies that are building factories and industries and all of that. And my final point to you is that it is not a development bank's job to do venture building. We have over 30 ESO members of Startup Uganda. That's what they do every day. Your job is to say, give us pipeline. Give us 100 of your most ready startups with your solutioning that you're talking about, and give them this money. So I think you need to enlighten us more about what we can benefit from UDB. If a startup that's ready wants to come tomorrow, how much will they get, for what equity, and all of that? And then my next question is to Vincent. The government has quite some fragmentation in its innovation support. The other week we were at National Science Week, run by STI Secretariat. The president pledged about $150 million or so for Innovation Fund. And then the Ministry of ICT also has a program, and this whole building is under their remit, and they do funding for startups. Now the Ministry of Trade is coming in and saying we are creating policy for startups. There's no fund for Ministry of Trade. I am glad the commissioner is here. And so there's all these silos, and you're all looking at the same players. Is there any initiative, especially with the Ministry of Trade team that's quite late to the party, to synergize and see how there can be joint support for startups? Finally, to the JICA team, I don't know who's going to answer this, but we've seen, lovely research. There was no talk of funding in the JICA presentations that were made. John mentioned startups are overtrained, underfunded. Is there a plan for there to be funding in your program, and what does that look like? The Ninja program already only provided about $30,000 to 3 startups. The Japanese government doesn't owe us anything, really, and we thank you for your initiative, but we just like a little more light on what your program looks like. Thank you.
I don't have my glasses, so you got to put up your hand again. Yeah.
My name is David Bakker, and I have a few questions. The first one is, how are we digging deeper into the education system to enable an aggressive startup culture? By that I mean, last month, during the Safaricom Engineering Summit, you could see that there was a direct relationship between Strathmore and Safaricom, that they were building some sort of artificial intelligence that does customized taxation for the different individuals. So my question is coming from the direction of how are we enabling like a more aggressive startup culture at each grassroots level? Second is, how deliberate are we when it comes to encouraging and rewarding independent thinking? I think this goes back to both our government and the private sector players, and this feeds into my third question, which is, how are we enabling enterprises to open source research data that innovators can tap into to build better problems? I think very many businesses have data points, but these data points are not available. For example, how this would work out would be that maybe a business's problem or a case study of a business problem is a coursework case study or is a coursework research, which has happened like with Harvard Business Review. Then the last question is, how do we ensure that the big businesses are building tools that can enable entrepreneurs to build on top of what's already existing? This could be in the form of APIs. So I'm just looking at all these 4 questions and I'm seeing how do the different players come intact. Thank you.
Well, because we really made this program so we can have relevant conversation, I'm just going to allow one more question so we do justice to the crowd. Do you want to find me midway? That would be great. Come on, you can stand up.
Well, my name is called Carlo Peter. So I'm a student at UICT. I do electronics and communication engineering. My question goes to Mr. Frederick. You talked about bringing out these innovation prototypes in public universities. But like for me, I'm in an institution, but we do a lot of projects. So how are you going to help us, we people who are just in institutions? Because we are more creative and innovative. And I know all of you people, you know that diploma students needs more skills than other students. So I just want you to elaborate us more about that issue. Thank you.
I'm so glad I took that question. And I hope with the panel, you also feel grace. I know some of the questions are quite rough. But the goal for this conversation is so we can be relevant. And I hope you also had the memory to remember all those. So good luck, especially Barbara. We got the firing squad.
Wow. A lot of the questions were with UDB, so it's a very good place to start. And I think one of them was, what are the thresholds? You know, it seems like it's extremely hard to get your money. What are the thresholds? What do you look for? And then there was also something about, the equity fund. I think it also goes back to the thresholds as well. There's nothing on the equity fund. It's not clear how much equity you take. How does that work?
Right, that is why we are here. Let me start with the beautiful lady who asked about the women enterprises, before I go into the thresholds and stuff. One of the things that we're doing, we cannot be in all spaces at the same time. Yes, we are Uganda Development Bank, but we can't be in all spaces at the same time. So if you have brought over maybe ladies who have come through and they haven't gotten, there must be a reason why. My humble ask to you, because you are part of a women entity, and that's what we do. We partner with entities that bring leads to the bank. Before we leave this place, that is, I think, the partnership we have to cement so that we handle the women in your organization as they are. You see, it becomes a problem if you bring in one at a time. If you're part of an association, it's always good to come as an association and we handle the problems. The problem could have been that a lot of the things that were needed were not found. Maybe there was miscommunication, but I'm sure that is something that we can We can tackle and we can handle. Something I need to mention here. A lot of the files that we get in, or a lot of the leads that we get in as a bank, come from all kinds of sectors. And like I said, we are sector specific. You get in the lead, it comes through, but maybe it is not part of our focus areas. So it is critical to know where we play. Maybe I need to explain that fast. Where we play, agriculture. The whole ecosystem of agriculture is one of the areas, actually the biggest area where we play, okay? The other one is tourism, manufacturing, industry, infrastructure, the creative industry, health, education. So all these are sectors that we play in, and all that is on our website. But as you're coming to Uganda Development Bank, that focus area has to be at the back of your mind. Also, another thing to notice, being development funds, please, this is not a commercial bank. So don't explain to come today and then tomorrow I am going to give you the money. No, because there are so many things that we look out for. I talked about social and economic transformation. How many women? How many youth? What value are you adding? How are you growing the economy? There's so many pinpoints we look at to see if actually the company you're starting or the solution is actually going to help Uganda grow. That is why we are a development bank. These are development funds, not just a loan, to just come and get a loan to run your business. There's a lot of things that we look at. In terms of equity, I'm not going to dive into the equity product right now. Equity is a case-by-case basis because each company has different needs. So it is structured according to your need, okay? So if you need equity or you feel you're ready for equity from UDP, which we do give, those are discussions that happen on a one-on-one basis. So those ones I'm not going to dive into right now, but that's a discussion we can have after. Ladies and gentlemen, the funds of UDB are there. But please come to Uganda Development Bank okay? Knowing that, one, you're not going to get the funds immediately, but this is patient capital that will help your business, so don't expect it soon. But also, let's come prepared to get it. And that is where the business advisory department comes in to assist, to help you prepare your file so that it is easy for your file to go through the processes. A lot of times in the event, we cannot handle that. We will always refer you to other entities to help you get the right funding. I hope I have exhausted. Elio Mlala? No? Okay.
We'll settle for that for now. Vincent, there were some interesting questions here on the policy side. Duplication, right? Duplication of efforts. We now know that there's a platform that is being done by the Ministry of ICT. So how do we overcome that duplication as we do all these different interventions? And then the other thing was something on fragmentation. I think that came from Donald, of innovation support. And I think that's mostly on, coordination of the ecosystem. Everyone has their own silo. Is there any policy intervention that you're looking at to encourage people to come together and work together?
Thank you for that question, Raymond. Actually, the question on duplication of work is twofold. One is for the development partners, and the other one was with the startups. How do we engage them directly? Now, for the development partners, we have put a mechanism in place. We have conceptualized a development partners round table for startups. And we have already had one engagement in November this year. I think UNDP was represented there. Even Annabelle came through, where we share ideas. It's about information sharing. And it came out clearly in that meeting that there is a lot of intervention that is not shared in the ecosystem. Something that came out also very clearly was on the issue of the database. You say you have a database in place. Startup Uganda is also doing a database, and the JICA ecosystem project is also pursuing one. So these are questions that have to be answered within the framework of this development partners roundtable. It happens every quarter, and the next one will be in February. Then comes the issue of the grass, the startups themselves. We have a roadmap in place when we have the draft policy starting in January, and our first activity is to do a national stakeholder engagement. We're going to go around the country, like we did with the hubs before, getting your views. But over and above that, we're going to use the ministry infrastructure as well. We have district commercial officers who will go further, deeper in, and get views from there. So that space is there within our roadmap for development of the policy. And we've used that before. But having said that, I've been in a room with you more than twice. And you always have access to us. You know exactly where we are. On the 5th and 6th floor at the Ministry of Trade. So you have access to us, and we can always answer your questions. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we shall include you. We shall engage you more. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the question again was also on how does the Ministry of Trade come in to support the startups when these other agencies or ministries are doing the fundamentals. Indeed, the Ministry of Trade links you to the markets. The Ministry of Trade is responsible for negotiating the markets regionally, continental, and then the international. We already have the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have all these markets like you have seen even the program. We'll connect you to Japanese markets, China markets, and all those. Remember, Ministry of Trade will give you a certificate when you are to export your products. Or when the customers are to take your products, they will need to do due diligence. And the first point of contact will be Ministry of Trade. So that database we are talking about is not only just to know that you are existing, but to recommend you that actually your product has been certified. Remember, Ministry of Trade has National Bureau of Standards, which will certify your product. So it's not a matter of duplication of databases, but each database sometimes has its parameters that we are looking at. So in this case, we are trying to make sure that you hit the market. And we'll give you, right now we have the African Startup Secretariat hosted in Algeria. I'm the focal point person. Actually, they are calling for those who are interested to go and attend the first conference. So in this case, we are committed to support you so that we can continue hitting the market. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know where to find him, so you can go to Algeria.
And maybe just a comment to throw in there. I think all these challenges are wonderful, and challenges are always an opportunity for innovation. And most of these challenges that we're facing can be solved with solutions that are going to come from the entrepreneurs. You know, so let's use technology. We are living in a digital age. So is there a way we can digitize the entire processes to make things more efficient? Is there a way that we can use AI and big data to sort of help us to streamline all these things? So I think there's a big opportunity for inventing something.
Warui, before you leave, someone had an interesting question, and I think you'd be best placed to answer it. How are we enabling an aggressive startup culture? We want to tap into probably your Kenyan heritage. It gets thrown around a lot, how Kenyans are very aggressive.
Yeah.
So how are we enabling, or aren't we enabling, or are we failing to enable?
Okay, so maybe just speaking from my experience with what happens in Kenya. So number one, as I said, there is that issue of making sure that the people who are training the startups know what they're doing. They know the right path, okay? If you're guided well, you will probably do well. There's also another responsibility that is on the startup themselves. I'm sorry to say this, a bit controversial, but many people want to be spoon-fed, and it can be extremely hard for entrepreneur support organizations to come, be with you, prepare the food, feed you, and do everything. So there needs to be a lot of initiative coming from you, and I'm not saying you're lazy. I'm just saying there's a lot of initiative that needs to come from you. For example, for the gentleman who was asking about where can he get technical assistance, there's a lot of entrepreneur organizations that can help you incubate. What probably needs to be put into place is more funds directed into those very early ideas, the nascent ones. And I know we have people like MasterCard, I have the UN bodies here, there are a lot of development institutions, and we are always doing call for solutions, call for innovation, call for everything. So I think it's high time you get off your seat and take advantage of all the opportunities that are surrounding you, because I cannot sit here and say that opportunities are not being built. They are there, they're for you to come and access.
Yeah. Thank you, Arui. There are 3 questions, some of which might be difficult to answer, but there's one on how do we make sure that some of this research data is open source. And I think a very basic example is, as deal advisors, sometimes you'll find that if it's like an acquisition or you're trying to value a startup, you would want to do a market comparable to see and say that, look, a startup in this industry at this stage, they were bought this much at this multiple or something like that. If you try to do that in Uganda right now, that data isn't available. People hide that information. You'll never find it. So the question from him is, what are we doing to make sure that data is available?
Okay,
Can
thank you
take
so
us?
much.
This is to anyone, if you're
Yes,
comfortable.
I know that is not an easy question, but I think there are quite a number of things that are happening that we need to support as partners. Number one is the digital transformation roadmap was launched in August, and it had two complementary strategies. One of them was big data utilization strategy, and then the other was skilling, digital skilling. Now, what the big data utilization strategy is suggesting, and that's now upon us to start the implementation of this strategy, is that we have quite a number of databases that are being developed, but have no access, or maybe they have restrictions in terms of access. Or there is even a lot of duplication. You find that URI is collecting data on revenue, KCCA is collecting the same data, trade is collecting the same data because they have to link the traders to the international markets. So what this strategy is suggesting is that we need to start creating the single source of truth for the different databases. If it is data on trade, where is it? Where do I go and I can have access to any data regarding trade? Ministry of Trade should have that. If it is data on revenue and taxes, URA should have a single source of truth. If it is data on identification, I need to go to NIRA and I have that data. Now the question would be, how do I make this data accessible? Now that's where one of the pillars on the digital transformation roadmap comes in, access to data, but also privacy. This data belongs to the individual. It doesn't actually belong to NIRA or government. It's my data. It's not, government is just a custodian of this data. This data is supposed to facilitate development, supposed to facilitate innovation. So now we are saying government needs to put in place a strategy for, an enabling environment for access to data. It shouldn't be a hindrance. Data is something that should be accessible because it should support the aspects of innovations and so on. So the strategy has been put in place and it has a lot of recommendations on open data so that it supports innovation, it supports development. And now it's upon all of us to look at this strategy and then implement this strategy. So open data, especially even aspects of private sector data. If you want data on financing, on mobile money within MTN or telecoms, how do you access this data? So there is quite a lot of recommendations that possibly we think to work together towards the implementation of this, and this requires change of mindset. This is not your data. While we are talking about the portals, it's okay for a startup support organization to have a database for the work they are doing. But how does this portal link to one single source of truth? So if you have your database as, let's say, Startup Uganda, it's for the work that you're doing, and it's okay. But where do we go for this single source of truth that links all these systems that we are independently creating? So that if I want data on startups, I don't go to Startup Uganda, I go to this one single source of truth that links the rest of the databases that are existing. Kenya had the same challenge until they created what they call Kenya Innovation Agents. Everyone was also busy doing like what we do. We don't have that in the country. So that's why we are saying at least there must be one source upon which the rest of the databases are linked to. It's okay to have different databases, but there shouldn't be a duplication of what is existing when you link all these databases that are existing. So it creates the issue of data and access, but also the different databases that are existing. The last comment that I want to give is on what happens to aspects of duplication. For God's sake, we have about 25 ESOs in this country. What does it take for you to write an email to the rest of the ESOs about a startup that you're going to give a seed grant to as part of your background check? You work with the Resilient Africa Network, which is also a startup support organization. you find that this is an entrepreneur who is getting funding from Innovation Village, Outbox, Resilient Africa Network, Startup Uganda, everywhere. Because we've seen grant entrepreneurs going everywhere and it is not helping them. Instead, it is killing the entrepreneurship spirit in the country. Simply because we want to own things in silos and say, this is my innovator, is doing very well, I have nothing to do with what Outbox is doing with this innovator. So for me, my recommendation is we need to work together and make sure that even before you fund anything, you send out an email to some of these organizations and understand what is happening within the ecosystem as part of the background check. So,
Thank you so much. And I think our time is fast spent. It was a really engaging panel. And looking forward to connecting with most of you. Please stay around and try to talk to everyone.
A round of applause, because you really, really put them at the